Welcome to Honest Whispers Preview to Sale. On this video I'll be previewing DC Direct's DC Infinite Crisis Action Figures Series 2 Wonder Girl. It was released back in May 2007 and it's approximately 6 3/4 inches tall. The designer is Phil Jimenez, or it's based on the artwork by Phil Jimenez. And this figure was sculpted by Greenwell. I'll go over 6 different categories to preview this rather than a review, but still, because of the packaging, I'm able to see pretty much most of it, and I did look up online as far as how the rest, especially the back, looks. And overall, this is a pretty good figure, especially for a Wonder Girl figure. There isn't too many out there, too many variations of Wonder Girl figures that's been produced, and this one is pretty good out of most you can find, but still, I'll go over 6 different categories to preview this. First category is design, which basically covers the articulation and the concept, because it is an action figure. And this does have, like Wonder Woman and Donna, basically 11 points of articulation. 1 is on the neck, shoulders, or 2 on shoulders, 2 on elbows, 2 on wrists, since they turn, 2 on the legs or the hips, and basically 2 on the knees. So you could see the way she is posed a bit, so there isn't too much you can do with her on the poses, and especially because when you start moving her legs, she's gonna lose balance. At the same time, you can see how her hips kind of sway to her left, which is the same concept with everything, not everything, but with Wonder Woman and Donna. They both have that slight, I guess you could say, like a little sway on their hip stance. So basically their hip isn't straight, it is angled. So basically that limits a lot of different poses, and at the same time, the way they did the joints on these, especially at the hip, this one you can see isn't as bad, especially at this position. Of course, with Wonder Woman, you could see that the joint can be a little bit more visible, especially because the way her leg is shaped. So this one, if you start bending, it'll have the same effect. So the pose concept is very simple, but at the same time, it's simple sometimes it's good. It's just that the way I see this design, nothing really big stands out. I do like that they did design the belt separately, so that's a huge plus. So it's just kind of tied, well, I don't know if it's tied or locked around her, but basically it's not part of the mold of the figure, and at the same time, it just looks cleaner this way. But I could see that there is a production cost savings reasons for this, because you could see right here the shape of her body, her belt, everything same mold, same cast. So they've definitely, other than the belt and her head, which I'll go over as well, is the only difference. So definitely they probably saved a lot of cost just from using the same mold, which is virtually the same character, but still, it's something I wanted to point out at least. So other than that, the concept, there really isn't too much to talk about. The design, I give it a pretty good score out of 7 out of 10 on the design. Next category is sculpting, which basically covers execution and the details. And as you can see, this is based on the artwork of Phil Jimenez from the pages of Infinite Crisis. So it is somewhat similar to the way his art style is, but at the same time, the proportions of the body doesn't quite match the way Phil Jimenez draws. Now, keep in mind, this cover art right here is by Jim Lee, so you really can't compare. And of course, Wonder Girl's not even on there. But if you do see his artwork, especially on Wonder Girl, she doesn't look as skinny. And I had a similar problem with Wonder Woman, her thighs and legs. This is a lot more visible on here, and what I'm trying to say is her legs, especially her thighs, have this weird triangular shape to it. So it's almost like the shape of a Toblerone, if you know what I mean. It's that triangular chocolate. So it's like, kind of makes it weird, and then also at the same time, it in different angles makes her look unproportioned, like her legs are too skinny. Arms aren't bad, but at the same time, when I start looking at it closely, her arms are a little bit too long in my opinion. I think that kind of throws out the proportion a bit. And if you start looking at her fingers, it's like alien like long. And then also they have the knuckles in the back of the hand kind of sculpted, so that even makes the fingers longer than it should look. So if you just look at the pointer and where the thumb is, I think if they shortened everything just a little bit, I think it would match. But you could tell like her hand is, maybe if the fingers, or if there was a little bit more thickness to it, it might look a little bit more proportioned and won't look like it's longer than it should be. Otherwise, even if it's slightly shorter, I think it could have worked out. I'm sure if you put Wonder Woman's hand next to her hand, she's probably gonna have a slightly longer finger. I didn't measure it, but it just looks that way for sure. So either way, proportion's a bit off for something so simple, but the details are good, at least for what it has, because you have like the hair strands and everything. I think the shape of the head is a little bit weird. It just, her face just comes in a bit too narrow, so it's a bit hard to tell here. But all I can say is it just kind of, the way her eyes and everything just doesn't really look that proportioned. So it looks like her eyes are too big or too long. At the same time, the way her face narrows inwards just really gives it an awkward shape, or even an awkward look in certain angles, like as if her forehead's going upwards. It's kind of weird. Now for this one, the way her neck is and the chin, this looks way better than Wonder Woman, how her head sticks out so far forward. So this one's a bit better, but at the same time, for something so simple, and it just really, the longer you look at the fingers and the body, it just looks a bit unproportioned. Now if it was trying to emulate a certain art style, then I could understand, but this is not even Phil Jimenez's art style. So for me, the execution seems off, but at the same time, looking at the proportion, that's definitely off. So I'm gonna give the sculpting grade an average 5 out of 5. Next category is painting. Painting basically covers the colors, quality of it, of the paint, and also the application. And for this, because it's a simple costume, red with stars, there's not much things you can go wrong on. So due to that, it is a lot, I guess the difficulty level of painting this costume isn't much, but you could see it isn't perfect. You still get some rough lines and rough edges, like right there on the left side, outer left side of her shoulder. And while her right side is very clean, it's like clean straight lines. But here, what I mean by rough is it almost kind of, it wiggles to a point where it almost looks like it's blurry at that point. You don't get that nice straight defining line. The stars there look like they're imprinted, perfect stars. They do look symmetrical and everything, so that's applied pretty well. Bracelets, you could see straight lines, not quite perfect, but that one's pretty close. And even right here, pretty much close. Now, the wrist, it's probably a separate piece, so to get the edge on the front part, that's just basically the plastic, the edge of the plastic piece, so can't mess up there. Paint on the boot line looks very clean and straight. I can't tell from here, but it's a possible separate piece. If not, very well applied. Nice little shine to it. It is basically matte finish, but the imprinted stars, they do have a bit of a shine to it. And the eyes, they slightly messed up. The eyes in the first place are too big. The pupils are too small for this size eyes. And one eye is slightly bigger than, or not bigger, but her right eye is like dead center in the middle, and her left eye, that one's like a little bit more inward, so it has slightly asymmetrical. And at the same time, you can't really see it here, but I noticed that it looks like these eyes are imprinted as well, so they're not painted. But then her right eye is slightly off, so like there's a bottom piece where it's like a shiny part, like a glossy shiny part. So looks kind of weird. Well, you can only tell when you're looking up really close, so I can't tell. I have to use the light to get it reflected off. But other than that, for, you know, not many flaws. I think the biggest flaw is the eyes, and it's only when you start really looking up close. And for some weird reason, well, I can't say weird reason, but I guess Mr. Greenwell decided to kind of have her head tilted down, so you can never really see her perfectly straight on unless you're looking up from a low angle. So the painting, you know, it's simple, but you know, this is something where they could have easily gotten it perfectly right. So due to that, as I mentioned, it's not a huge flaw, but then at the same time, I mean, the best I could score, I would honestly give this would be a 7 out of 10. Packaging is the next category, and as you can see, this is basically a blister card packaging, and it is kind of self-explanatory why they call that, or why the name is that. Another name I prefer to use is basically a bubble card packaging, because it's basically like a bubble or a blister. So, but for this, it's very consistent with all the other figures from the series. I think basically the design, it's not quite simple, but at the same time it's not all that extravagant. You do have the card kind of cut out a little bit to shape out the comic book there. I do like how the base is on the top, and the actual logo of the packaging. So there's no Infinite Crisis colored or painted on there or written on there. It's basically they use the base, and I think that's a clever, very ingenious idea. Card, as you can see, just minor dings on the corner right there. A minor ding right there. Other than that, no creases, no folds, no tears. There is a minor ding right here on the bottom corner, and this corner pretty much perfect. So definitely, at least the condition for this packaging is in good shape, and at the same time, because of the shape of it, nice, you get that nice kind of square kind of shape, so rectangular shape. So basically, wasn't that hard for me to keep it stored, and then at the same time maintain the condition that I bought it in. Packaging on the back is the same for every other figures. So these are all universal. Basically, probably lowers the production value overall. So the only difference really is the sticker. So it's kind of smart to kind of save money that way. At the same time, I do like the background, the way it's kind of white, like a flashing light with a bunch of little like rays or some kind of like light shining out, which kind of helps the character or the figure stand out from the package rather than just a blank background or something simple. So the packaging grade, I give it an 8 out of 10. Next category is value. Value basically is retail versus aftermarket for me, or whether if this is an item that's going to continue to go up in value. And for me, this one, originally it cost around $10 to $12, 15 at the most, but it's around that range. And at the same time, this one, the lowest I could find for Wonder Girl, whether Amazon, eBay, other selling apps, the lowest I can find is like $27. So surprisingly, whether if it's because the lack of supply or the demand for this being, even though I'm critical about how it is, it's still for Wonder Girl's line of produced figures. This is actually one of the better looking ones. So I could see that the demand for Wonder Girl fans to be pretty high. So the value on this, it's decent, not that bad, and I could see that value continue to climb over a long period of time. But for something that's over 10 years old, I would expect something to be easily, 200%, or at least close to it, close 200% above its retail value, at least close to it. So this one, I give it a 7 out of 10 on the value. Last category is overall. Basically, this accounts for all the 6 or 5 different categories prior: design, sculpting, painting, packaging, and value. And for me, as I said, even for me personally, this is one of my, I guess, out of the Wonder Girl character, figures that I've seen, this is one of my favorites. Definitely, especially the way it looks. I wish that they did the proportions, or at least the shape of the legs and everything, a little bit better. Otherwise, for me, I'm at a point where I'd rather try to sell this as a set, as a bundle, get the most out, value out of it, rather than opening it and trying to display it on my limited shelf space. So for me, I hate to let this go, but yeah, I think the value is pretty good on this compared to Wonder Woman. This just seems more rare. And another good sign would be the fact that there's not many loose figures that's for sale as well. So most people who open it probably ends up liking it. So the value, or not the value, but the overall score, as I mentioned, I like that costume, the way it's been done. I think it would have been way better if it was like a gloss finish. But overall look, even though it's a bit unproportioned, I do like it. And then the face, even though in some angles it looks a little weird, but overall when you look at it, like the eyes can be a bit like, it's like she has her eyes wide open a little bit like that. So yeah, I think it's really more about preference, but still, for what it is, it's not bad. That's all I could say. So the overall score, I give it a 7 out of 10. I really do like the way they executed her costume, and overall her body, the way it looks, especially at her breasts, her waist, and her hip, how her stomach is sculpted, that's really all done well. Even look at her collarbone, I like the details on that. Very simple. So there's a lot of pluses. So for me, definitely a 7 out of 10 on the overall. So to recap, design 7 out of 10, sculpting 5 out of 10, painting 7 out of 10, packaging 8 out of 10, value 7 out of 10, and overall 7 out of 10. Thank you for watching. Until next time, continue reading Infinite Crisis.